NADS. We have money now going to use entrepreneurs. We have money for web. But is that the best public investment? Isn't the comparative model possibly much better? If you look at the models people are using, like tea in the southwest, that's a commendable project. I was reading about Mukwano as a private sector working with the vegetable oil in the north. Kalangala is a successful story. So why don't we have nucleus regional projects which has brings on board smallholders, which brings on board outgrowers, but it also provides what we're looking for in the PMA, the 7 pillars. Do advisory and research, that we have inputs, the right inputs, because the problem with the government intervention of operation risk creation, they'll give wrong inputs at wrong time. And yet, if it has a private sector angle, you know that if I'm going to do vegetable oil, you have the right space. If it's going to be, BAT is a very good model, but I hate the crop. BAT model has the right inputs, agro machinery, value addition, crop finance, and marketing. The unfortunate part with them, they are in a tobacco which I don't support. But I think there is a lot we can do to make sure that our regions can be transformed.
Give a round of applause to Mr. Mukitale, Honorable Mukitale. I think this is an area he understands and he loves. He talks about it with a lot of passion. If we look into Uganda's population, you'll find almost 70% of our people are engaged in agriculture. And Mr. Enyimu, you find that agriculture contributes almost 20 or less than 30% to our GDP. How can we let our people, the majority of our people, contribute less to Uganda's GDP? How do you turn it around?
Well, thank you, Mr. Kamara, and good morning to the viewers and the delegates here. In terms of the shares of agriculture, first of all, and its contribution to the national output, and the second issue is about turning that around. You understand, consistent with the theme for this dialogue, which is economic transformation in the rural areas, that the transformation process has two aspects. It's essentially about, the movement of your factors of production from activities and sectors of low productivity to those of higher productivity. And so within agriculture, there is a range of performance there in terms of productivity. And as you talk about the low share of agriculture, you know that our development strategy is really towards building value chains, but also upgrading them. So we want to see more agricultural activities at the higher end of the value chain, as well as more people who are engaged in agriculture doing so with a commercial mindset. And the way you address currently the low productivity in agriculture, one, of course, is by raising output per worker. But the second thing is, as productivity of the labor in agriculture rises, typically people transition to sectors with higher with higher output and also higher incomes. And so the current strategy really is about making sure that we can up the yields within the sector, yield per acre or yield per tree in the case of our commercial crops. And in so doing, you improve the returns on those who are investing. The contribution in terms of GDP itself, it's a healthy thing, actually, that the share of agriculture gradually reduces, because that is consistent with your agenda of structural transformation. So what we need to be asking ourselves is, within the agricultural value chains, where are people located? Are we seeing more people moving towards the high-end activities of the value chain and also towards the commercial activities in these value chains? And that's essentially what government strategy is focused on.
You are Commissioner, Economic Development, Minister of Finance.
Yes.
And you believe that agriculture could unlock Uganda's potential. And yet, even with the background of the Maputo Declaration that asked you to put about 10% of your national budget into agriculture, you haven't done that. As a ministry, have you refused or just don't get it?
Okay, it's an issue of treating agriculture within a context of your development strategy, because agriculture to succeed is contingent on broadly about 3 factors. One, you can raise productivity of farms, meaning that per acre, per worker, you have more output. But that addresses your supply side of the equation. The critical drivers, if you ask an investor, that determines allocation of capital is one, your market. Is there a market for what is coming out of your agricultural sector? And the second one is in terms of industrial demand. Is your agricultural sector linked to the industrialization process? So on both ends, government is being proactive. As you know, we are growing our markets, both regionally and internationally. You may be pleased to know that for example, 10 years ago, we were exporting dairy and milk products, I think in the range of just about maybe $5 million. But as we speak, Uganda is on course to overtake South Africa as the leading exporter of dairy and milk products by could be even the end of this financial year. So within a span of 10 years, you can see what has happened, and largely it's opening up of markets in the Middle East, in the US, even within the region, but also the dynamic of the industrial players that have come into the sector. So that provides the link with now the rural farmers. And for that to happen, you have to deploy energy. You're not going to set up these factories without power. You have to have a very efficient transport network. And so you have to link your investment in agriculture to your development agenda. Number two, as managers of taxpayers' money, we are not satisfied in just achieving statistical allocations, because the citizens are investing. And so they are asking the question, what is the return on our investment? And so as we put money in agriculture, the bigger question is not so much how much are we allocating. The issue is what is the return for the investment that is going to agriculture, and that's what we would like to have a conversation around. And government is moved on that front as well. We have just devised as part of this budget what we call a public investment management and agro-industrialization strategy, meaning how do you coordinate public investment using a whole of government approach to actually drive the agro-industrialization agenda.
Oh, thank you very much. Give me a round of applause. The return on the investment in agriculture. He just spoke about new markets emerging in Asia and the Middle East. We have 1 billion Chinese, more than 1 billion Indians. They want our organic food and all that. Can't we invest in agriculture? And we're already having some markets, and we can have a return on investment that is good, Mr. Mukonda.
I think for me that has been my argument over time, is that probably the kind of choices we make when we invest in agriculture, we need to go back to the drawing board. And he has brought a very good example for dairy. Of recent, actually, if you go to villages, you don't need to milk your cow. Somebody says, please don't milk. I will come and milk, measure your milk, then pay you and I go away. That's how it has gone to the extent that people know there is the market, they have their cows, and it has evolved itself because government went ahead to invest strategically in this particular area, especially in creating markets. And this is something I have said. If you guarantee markets of any agricultural product, let me tell you, investors, whether they are roads or not, investors will rush there and ensure that they grow those crops and have them produced and sold. As such, I would encourage OWC, for example, instead of buying a goat from your neighbor which is already sick and giving it to you, just guarantee that whoever is going to produce goats, we are going to buy them. If you produce beans, we are going to buy them. Set up these silos we are talking about in the whole country, so that if I'm going to grow my maize, it does not, the price does not fall from 1,000 in 3 months to 200 shillings, and you feel like just burning the whole garden. But if you decide and say, please, whatever is going to be produced, we can be able to buy them at this particular price. You just guarantee the price only. All this money we are sinking in these other things, and we just guarantee that we can buy these things. I can tell you, farmers will find their own extension services, will look for their own right inputs, will also ensure that actually they can even store to ensure that they have the right quality.
Okay. Honorable Mokitale, we know for a fact that 2 years ago, in fact 1 year ago, farmers were told to go into agriculture. They invested their money in growing maize, and I'm told this country produced almost 4 million metric tons of maize, and farmers made a loss. Yes. How can you tell them again that go into agriculture? Yet they did, and they have burnt their fingers.
The cobweb theorem is elementary economics. Anybody would know that if you don't, the biggest loss in agriculture for peasants is in post-harvest losses. Post-harvest only confirms that you're backward, you're not doing value addition. You don't have storage, because if you had capacity to store your maize, then you don't have to even be discussing the challenge of maize when you have a bumper harvest, that you cannot have capacity to add value, to preserve, avoid post-harvest losses, and the market means that you take food from surplus areas to deficient areas. And we have a market in this region. We don't wish our neighbors, DRC and Sudan, to remain problems, but food crops have since become an export. If you read this budget framework strategy, the expectation of there is no the current account comfort is not derived from increased exports. They are talking of increased investment in oil and gas. But oil and gas has a recoverable cost. We should have been interested more in exports drive. You remember the days of grow more coffee, grow more cotton. Now, it must be across the value chain. It must be a sector intervention. If you want to increase exports in cotton, don't only get one person in Bugolobi and give him money if you cannot intervene in Lira spinning mill and ATM barley.
Yes.
So it must start from the farmer. The last 2 years we have had a challenge of wrong seeds of cotton. So you must have the right inputs, you must have the geners, you must have the ones working on the apparels, and then so that if there is a Goa market, then you can talk of that export drive. So I think it is very important that I agree, yes, we must, and we are talking of transformation. Let me talk about the transformation agenda. The transformation agenda expects us to work harder than what we are doing. Currently, what we are doing in NADS is preservation of peasantry. And yet we are peasantry. That's what we have been doing for the last 2 decades. Now, what we must realize that Malsa's trap is about to catch up with us. Uganda is so fertile. We have the youngest population, but also one of the fastest growing in the world. By the vision 2040, Uganda will be 100 million population. Now, with the current land conflicts, the Bamgemerere conflict, we don't want to be just a Kasokoso and without land for production. So we must also, why I talked about the National Fiscal Plan, I'm also bringing the issue of urbanization of cities, organized urbanization with fiscal plan. That we must have radical land reforms. Because this agriculture we are talking of is not in space, it is on land. So how are you consolidating land for production? Can we do land reforms to the effect that people are living in cities, people are living in some municipalities, and when they are in these municipalities, they leave the land outside for serious, extensive farming. Then they can stay actually in the city, go and work in an estate, and come back on trucks. They provide the market. So this brings in the question of specialization. Each region in this country has different soils and different climate, and therefore we have different advantages. So the zoning talk, which has been here for over 20 years, we have not implemented it. So in these areas, they can then create even demand for low-cost housing. If you create vertical condominiums, low-cost housing, you are saving land for the extra 100 million which is coming in another 30 years. But if we don't do that, we're going to have a problem. Everybody wants to go in his village and put up a bungalow. That was the colonial mentality that Nakasera and Kololo and Entebbe Bugonga was for the well-to-do. That's the wrong thinking. You're spending a lot of money in that investment, and that takes him back to the cottage.
So you want the people in Bulisa, in your constituency, to live in high-rise
We want organized.
That's what you want.
We want organized low-cost housing. It could be flats, it could be a settlement, but which has connectivity, because it's even cheaper for government to give power to municipalities as opposed to sub-counties. Education, health. Look at the Western Europe. Because of the depression after the World War, they decided to create constitutional camps. Constitutional camps have since become the cities you want to go and enjoy. But for us, when we had a challenge in the northern Uganda, there were IDPs which had water, which had security, which had schools and health. But after the war, what do we say? Instead of recovering the 20 years they lost by developing them, everybody ran back.
Wait a minute.
To the
Honorable
villages.
Stephen Mokitale, are you suggesting the catastrophe that befell northern Uganda, we could have left those people in the
We can
the camp?
turn a crisis into an opportunity. That's leadership.
So you think it was wrong to let our brothers in northern Uganda go back to their villages?
I said this 13 years ago. It was sentimental for us to demolish those densities and those organizations. What was required, however, because of the psychological torture and the fear of the land grab, was to assure them that all the land is safe and they get their titles of their customary land, and then they would be the ones attracting investors, as opposed to what's happening now. Somebody has to go to State House to go and invest in Noya and Amuru. That's unfortunate. Now, what we need also again, because all this development which is happening is having a lot of disparities. How do we make this landowner of Amuru, of Teso, have an equity in an investment? An investment, we want you to have some land which is at least surveyed, which is having a title. But right now, even if you want investors to partner with communities as an equity for land holding, the land in the country has multiple land tenure and is not even systematically demarcated. So which investor is going to risk to work with the community where land, because to attract an investor in land, he needs to be, the tenure must have security.
Okay.
So I want to emphasize that point, that it's actually possible, but we need to specialize that in this region, people can do 4 products, because you're not going to have market for 1 pig, for 1 chicken in Nads. We know where the market is. I've said food has a market, cotton has a market, coffee has a market, tea has a market, and we know Vietnam, which had a conflict like Uganda, the last 15 years after they got peace, they are now one of the best coffee growers in the world. And they are transforming the economy after war using specialization on coffee. And that's possible. And Uganda has other low-hanging fruits, areas which you can turn as cash cows, including tourism. The Albertine you talk about, I hear too much about oil. Albertine will remain a tourism destination. What we need is investment in that area.
All right, thank you very much. And I'll be coming to the audience. I'm sure you have picked some of his points, and perhaps you'll agree with him or disagree, but that's going to be in a moment. And let me go now to Mr. Enyumo, because he talked at the beginning the issues of lack of storage, for example. What, as government, do you have in place? Because some people lose their products because of poor storage, in fact, lack of storage. I'm told even some countries, the market was there, but because our maize, they suspected it could have, maybe it had some aflatoxins because of poor handling, and that's why they never bought it. So what is the capacity for government to be able to store the produce for the local management?
Well, thank you. It's a valid point in terms of the development agenda within the agricultural sector, but as has been made mention before, any credible development strategy must be able to sequence your interventions. So as you talk about setting up silos across the country, you have to appreciate that modern storage is a function, amongst other things, of energy, for example. You cannot just have these silos. They have to be regulated in terms of temperature and all of this. So logically, your rural electrification agenda must be able to go ahead of some of these interventions. And you will appreciate that in the current budget, or rather the upcoming budget for 1920, rural electrification is very high on the agenda in terms of getting power across all the sub-counties into the country and eventually into these different growth centers. The other thing also is that the way you reduce post-harvest losses beyond just storage is making sure that you up your game in terms of processing, because processed products have a longer life shelf. And that ties well with the point which was earlier mentioned, the whole issue of cottage industry. If you look at the success of the vegetable oil industry, for example, in northern Uganda, in Lira, it's not just the big players. You have a lot of small and medium-scale enterprises doing processing of sunflower into basic forms of vegetable oil. And so you'll observe that, yes, you have to make sure that your feeder road network can facilitate these cottage industries and SMEs, and that they have power to transform these inputs. And that way we improve their life, and also we improve the return on the investment.
Okay, what I have witnessed in Western Uganda, for example, where I come from, in Chenjojo and areas of Kamwenge, you would see during the bumper harvest, trucks coming in from Kenya. They come and even park at the garden. They get kasoli, maize grain, and then take it across at the border. And you wonder, with that, they have taken our jobs. There's no processing for that we're doing in Uganda. Can there be a way where maybe a bylaw, Mr. Julius Mukunda, that maybe maize should not be exported to Rwanda or Kenya as grain, so that at least we add some value? In the process, we are having jobs. In the process, we are gaining skills. In the process, we are spreading some wealth in the communities.
Animal feeds.
But as it is now, grain goes as grain from Kampala to Nairobi.
With the brand.
Yes, but
I mean, there is a partial case for that. You know that we are within a common market. So really, at the end of the day, we have a twofold interest: that the farmer gets a good return on their investment, and whoever offers that, we should not deprive them the opportunity. But from a strategic perspective, we are saying let's upgrade our value chains. So for example, in the past, people who are in the cattle corridor, they would move with cows from place to place looking for pasture. But now we have an opportunity. As land becomes scarce, we are saying there is a whole new market opening up, animal feed. And that guarantees you, a demand for maize grain that may not be consumed. The second thing I would like you to appreciate, of course, is the interconnection between urbanization and the rural economy. You will notice that we had a resurgence in agricultural growth in 17-18. Agriculture the previous year grew by 1.6%, but in 17-18 it doubled to 3.2%. And the biggest driver of that growth was not the cash crop sector. It was the food crop sector. So as disposable incomes improve in the urban areas, the demand for protein and other foods which are commensurate with urbanization is on the rise. And so we are saying that, how do you transform this grain into the kind of product range that is consistent with urban demand? And those are the linkages that are unfolding in the development of an integrated economy.
I mean, it's something I agree with him that, yes, if a farmer is going to get $1 in a kilogram of maize, and from the Kenyan, and the Ugandan is going to pay 3,000, definitely I would want my farmer to get $1. We should definitely deprive them. But I think there is this argument about, should we invest for agriculture, or we should invest in agriculture? I think if we could be able to agree probably on that one, because my feeling is that this Kenyan farmer or Kenyan businessman, knowing that there is maize in a particular garden and he brings his vehicle to that particular garden, there is something that is taking him, that there is maize there. So if we have these nicely built roads, but we have not grown the maize, then we are not going to utilize these roads the way we want them. I would have loved to see more investment in the sector. Let us provide the right inputs. Let us invest in our National Agricultural Research Organization to ensure that the hybrids they have produced can actually be sold to these farmers can be produced, massive at a commercial level, so that these farmers can be able to get them. In return, farmers can be able to say we are going to produce the right crops and also have the right animals for these regional markets. Because once they do them, then I'm very sure is that they can attract markets. So it's not a chicken and an egg issue here, really. It's something that is straight, that we can be able to understand that if we invest more in agriculture, definitely we have more returns. And I'm not disputing that, we should forget about the roads. But which one should come first? For me, I think that's my biggest argument. Which one should come first? Should we first put a highway before we facilitate farmers to grow better crops, or we can help them have the better crops, and then we come for the highway later? I think from that's the other argument that we need.
Okay, yes. Honorable Mokitale, I think we don't even have to overstretch the debate whether the roads and energy are a wrong investment.
Yeah.
We should also, in the budget, we should talk at resource mobilization. We look at the domestic revenue. Where are these areas where we are wasting money, where we can save money? There are monies we know are in the budget, but they have no return on investment. So for me, I don't want to debate against roads. I don't want to debate against energy. I would want us to look infra-government. 2 years ago, it was announced that we have a lot of duplication. We have a lot of parallel institutions. We are going to have rationalization and mergers. What has happened? So let's have the mergers and do core mandates. Let's review all government ministries, departments, and agencies, authorities, and then say who is supposed to do what. And whoever is not required, you are talking of a private sector economy.
Where is that voice in Parliament?
Let us outsource.
Where is that
we have been raising it. But you see, reorganizing government is not a mandate of Parliament, it's a mandate of the executive.
But at the end of the day, you allocate resources.
Parliamentary recommendations are advisory. So I really want, I'm not a public relation for Parliament, but I just want, public expects a lot of from Parliament, and yet we are limited. Remember, we have a presidential system. The president's budget, by the way, is bigger than 5 ministries, which could help the youth and other, because of presidentialism. And that's why I'm an advocate of national dialogue. Not reduce powers of the president, but we want resources more to regional centers. Even the transformation we are talking of an imbalance. But the point I had earlier wanted to raise is that it's an old, proven performance that cooperatives were intended to protect the farm gate price, a farmer against the middleman. So the reason why a Kenyan, a Burundian, a Rwandese is coming in Kigali, in Chankwanz, is because we killed cooperatives. So we needed cooperatives yesterday. And there is nothing wrong for us to review policy and say cooperatives are important. Now, when you have cooperatives, in line with what I earlier talked about, nucleus producer cooperatives, you're doing specialization. You have expertise on everything. Are you doing Irish? Are you doing cotton? Are you doing vegetable oil? Because export market requires both quantity and quality. Now, if you have that, the profits of a cooperative in that maize, in that bumper harvest, would be invested in a silo, would be invested in a warehouse receipt, would go into agro-processing. The argument I brought earlier of demographic dividends is that because the population is increasing so fast and because we are so fertile, if we don't have a demographic shift in terms of transformation, the land alone will not keep us there. So we need to see more people moving from the actual tilling of land into agro-processing. It is that number which will create service industry. Why we are having a crisis today and this inequality, the money makers, the MTNs, let me not use the name of the company. Let me use the telecom sector, the banking sector, the insurance, do not employ our citizens. Our people are stuck 80% in agriculture, but agriculture is not growing. So the debate of structural reform and transformation should be in unlocking the economy in terms of structural transformation by moving our peasants from producing just for household use, but commercialized level, and that requires quantity and quality, and that's when you can now do the agro processing. That's when you grow into industry. Look at countries which have moved from agro to agro industry. It comes through processing, so it can't just start by industrialization without the value chain intervention. And for me, that's why I want to emphasize that cooperatives we must have an investment in cooperative, as opposed to the circles and the NARs who have struggled for 20 years. I want to emphasize that also, why are we having a public investment called the UPE, USE? I don't know how many graduates. When I graduated, we were only 630 admitted in the whole country. But we're having jobless graduates. So why don't we not only discuss the question of the budget for education, but the relevance of the curriculum? Is the curriculum appropriate? My answer is no. Our curriculum is disabling people. Not everybody is doing agriculture, yet 80% after dropping out from UP and USC are in agriculture without doing basics of agriculture, without doing health science. And yet we are saying, as he said, primary health care should be priority, and that can be given in terms of the education curriculum both in UP and USE. So we also need to change mindset. We need entrepreneurship. We need an education curriculum which is vocationalized, not by just waiting S6 drop out to think of vocationalization. Can start from UPE in terms of curriculum. Secondary education can be vocationalized. There's what they call comprehensive. So by the time you come out, before you think of graduating and putting pressure of government quota and government, a student starting with a loan, a loan not what is required back home, I think that's disabling the citizen. We need to put our money in relevant curriculum, and I think vocationalization and skilling is the way to go, so that we can prepare to go on these industries, to make animal feeds, to, that's how we can have citizens who are job creators as opposed to job seekers.
I can see in the audience everybody was nodding, and I think you're in agreement with him, what his presentation on that. Now, if we go into agro-processing, I think that will require some kind of skills, because if what he said earlier, if we produce, we just not only have to produce for Kenya to take raw goods, but we have to, add some value to them, so that in the process we have, we have the jobs. But can we have a robust agro-processing industry without changing our education curriculum?
I mean, I think it's that's needed, because really now, if the way we used to grow our food crops, I mean, you just get the seeds and just throw them in the bush, But if you really want to have the quality and the quantity he's talking about, definitely there is a scientific method on how you should be able to do that. And to be able to do that, you need scientists. So for our education system definitely to be able to be relevant with what we want, then we need to look at the curriculum. We used to have school gardens, for example. You can ask right now how many schools have got school gardens. For me, I think that becomes a big issue, and its importance in terms of ensuring that we promote agricultural production, even in the country. So we need to ensure that we invest seriously in our education training institutions, in our agricultural training institutions, for example. This would help to ensure that we have the right graduates who can be able to advise our ordinary farmers on a daily basis to be able to have better practices. So how much money are we then investing in these education institutions that are likely to promote agriculture? That's a question that probably we need to be able to look at. The curriculum itself, I mean, if you start from primary 1 up, you reach primary 7 without interfacing with anything around agriculture, then it will tell you what you're likely to come up at the end of the day. But I think also is that in terms of economic transformation, people are now telling us that there is money around the country, and that they believe that we have so much money around the country. And people say, but we don't see this money, we don't touch this money. I think the question of having more people having all of the money, and then less people having less money around is another issue that affects rural transformation itself. Because if the biggest majority of people are in the rural areas, and most of them are the ones who are poor, and then you have these poor urbanized, and a few are the ones who are mostly rich, then as a government, I think it's quite very important that in order for us to have rural transformation, then we see how we can be able to ensure that we get these people from the rural areas out of poverty.
Okay.
And I think this has been a subject of my colleague here from finance.
We shall get back to Joseph, but
yes.
at this moment, let me also tap on the wisdom of members of parliament, who, by the way, are also among us here. We have, I think, Honorable Nambeshe has joined us, and Honorable Kayinza, right? I think I got it right, from Bududa. Thank you very much for being in that audience, and I'm going to ask, there's a gentleman just behind you who has a microphone. If you can hand it over to Honorable Nambeshe first, and then we'll get to know, because you're a leader, and at least in your area, Bugisho Cooperative Union is still working. In some other parts where I come from, Nyakatonza and all these places are not long gone. So what would be
Banyankole
Kweterana? I think there was no Watoro Kweterana. So how would we transform the rural communities economically, sir?
I must register my apologies for arriving late. My name is Nambeshe John Baptist. I represent Manjia. I concur with the Honorable Mukitale on the submission he made, particularly on how important our National Curriculum Center should actually change. And I had reliably saw that they had condensed the 45 or so subjects into 9 learning areas, which are practical and innovative. But the challenge we have again with such good policies is that in Uganda, we hardly see them implemented. And the implementation of those good curriculum plans may not see the light of day. But if they would, then indeed, as he has already put it, would see scientific ways of approaching agriculture and many other sectors. You are like saying Bugisu Cooperative Union, the only surviving union in Uganda, although there are others now that are coming up. But it is because of our ancestors, our parents, what they invested. And at the time, they were working tooth and nail to ensure that it would be passed on for posterity. Today, the challenge we have is greed. Even those that are fighting the union are from within. So the greed even has actually eaten us all up to even though this institution is where we are. Where if money is splashed around, you can turn against your only child. In Unguruetu, that kind of spirit of the pig that turns against its own and eats. So use of money and greed has almost caused most of the good plans that come up, or even which would be very productive.
So people are eating money not because they are in need, but because they are greedy.
Yeah, it is greed. We blame it on greed. Even in institutions like...
So those are the rich?
Yeah, of course. Those are the well-to-do. If it were to say a member of parliament would be easily compromised when you are well remunerated, you wonder what would be the cause of that. It could be a spirit, but that spirit should be the spirit of greed.
Why has is it that values seem to be evaporating among the rich?
Yeah, if you are talking about values, then we should talk about moral armament. But then who would champion the rearmament of morals? The moral fabric has degenerated. That's why you find those who are well-to-do are easily compromised to even fight what would be a very good program or a good policy. It's greed.
Okay, Honorable Kayinza, you represent the people of Bududa, and I'm sure it's also the rural community, and you'd want them to get out of poverty and economically empower them. When you look at the budget framework paper 2019-2020, you think it will be able to address the problems of the people in the Masaba land?
When I look at the budget framework paper, of course, definitely I see some gaps. And that's why when I said attentively to the panelists, maybe money alone, the allocations in themselves alone cannot transform the rural community. But when we combine with, for instance, the skills development, I agree with the panelists on about the education system. We should encourage our young people to go more into the skills development. And agriculture, like we said, 75% of the rural people, like with those of Ruda, are engaged in agriculture for their survival, for their the daily lives, that's why they survive on agriculture. But one of the panelists talked about knowing where the majority, where we should focus as a government. I concur with him on our major area of focus, because we talk about rural transformation. We look at, of course, employment as one. How do we increase their incomes? So if we really targeted the area of value addition, like we said, even in Bugishu, we see trucks coming from Kenya to the gardens to pick onions, to take bananas. But as a country, we are having some of these factories that are even non-functional. For instance, we have the Soroti fruit factory. We have issues at Yak. There are issues, they are not running as they should. So I think as legislators, maybe we should really advocate for more monies into these factories, because we shall see more of our young people, the rural fruit factories. Some of these have issues. So this, of course, much as I give examples at the national, but this gets back home to Bududa as well. If we encourage, as government, to see where the majority of the people are getting from. You know, of course, we've done the cultivation. We now have issues, the harvest. You talked about the maize. But how do we get more? We have a smaller group which is cultivating. But I think as a member of parliament from a rural community, value addition should be the way to go.
Thank you very much. You can give her a round of applause. And if you can take back the microphone, the gentleman at the back, I'm going to give you all the opportunity to speak. But for the moment, it is in his custody so that we can speak one at a time in an organized manner. And they have raised very important issues. But you're also legislators, honorable members. You allocate resources to government. You are the people who are supposed to determine where the money goes. And sometimes I wonder, where do you misallocate? And you are the people supposed even to follow for effective utilization of the money that you have already given the different departments. Honorable Mr. Joseph Enyimu, you've had members of parliament saying sometimes it's the greed, it's all these things that cause us sort of slide back or stay even in poverty. Even when you have a good policy, a good program, people will grab the money, and the rich will continue getting richer, and the poor are always in the doldrums.
To frame a response to the discussion on that's prevailing here, I think first let's clarify on a couple of things. Farmer organization is indeed important for progress towards commercialization of agriculture, but it is critical to understand that the cooperative ought to run as an enterprise, a business enterprise. It's not an association for the sake of association. And so the whole idea of nucleus farmers, the whole idea of providing extension services through those different frameworks is a model that ought to work by people coming together out of interest. And I think that's the line we need to toe. We are not going to herd people together to come for that. The other thing to remember, we are talking about budget allocation. Of course, the national budget accounts for just under 20% of our national GDP, which means the other 80% is in our hands as the citizens. And the issue then becomes the complementarity. What is the role of public investment in directing but also catalyzing a return on your investment and on my investment? And so we're talking about agriculture, investing for agriculture as opposed to in agriculture. You are aware, for example, through our efforts to promote and attract investors, as a country, we are now seeing production of things like fertilizers in country. And fertilizer is so critical to boosting productivity in agricultural sector. And so by facilitating these industrial parks, they need energy again, but you have to organize them as production spaces. We are actually pursuing an agro-industrialization agenda. You notice that we have veterinary drug manufacturers that have moved in and are now operating in the country. That is all private investment. So it would be a big mistake to look at public investment in isolation, not taking into account the complementarity role. The other thing which I thought is worth highlighting is that we are talking about stretching the public sector shilling. And government is actually responding on that need. For example, you know that we have just moved into program-based budgeting. So focusing more on development outcomes, okay, as opposed to just outputs. And that is part of the move that now as a country we can collectively set certain performance outcomes and deliver on them.
Okay.
And let me just make one last point. A lot has been talked about curriculum reform. You will appreciate that in terms of our labor force, we have about 10 million people in the labor force. And the statistics show that the average years of schooling in Uganda are 6 years. Okay, so you have a population in one sense that has passed that primary school age, and you have to do something with them to raise their productivity. But you also need a very sound basic education if you're going to build on both vocational and any academic education. So let's appreciate that curriculum reform is on the table. You are aware that Cabinet recently passed the policy on the creation of the BVET Council and also the qualification framework for vocational education, because the institutional architecture must support this. You know that they are developing now regional centers of excellence for vocational education so that people have an upward path. Otherwise, you have a very horizontal
But you also know in
system.
some of these technical institutions that have been built in different parts of our country, the enrollment there is very low. So in some cases, if you go to Namutumba, I think I've been to one of those, and another one in Agagwa and Chenjojo, the enrollment is low. And yet it is meant to have students there, give them skills, but the parents are not taking their children in some cases.
In some cases, the alignment between the supply of the students for this, but also the path out of vocational education requires refinement. But you have to approach this from a supply-led approach. You have to to trigger the demand, because that is the nature of the development agenda. We're not going to...
And sadly, even when they go there, we as Ugandans, we are not even taking our best. We want to take their some kind of failures with all respect. We think a typical Ugandan parent, rural Uganda, will say, if you have failed to continue to go and maybe get a certificate or something, a degree in community psychology, maybe you are a failure, you go into a vocational institute. Yet the vocational institute should be, in my view, coming number one now.
And that goes to the point I made earlier, that as a country you have to look at vocational education as through a path of excellence. So if you do not have these centers of excellence that are now being created, somebody would look into their future and say, where is the route up along this course, or where are the skills that the market is demanding?
Okay.
And so what comes first? And that is really the logic that government is responding to. And also talking about this in terms of, we're talking about rural transformation. There is a short-term agenda for transformation and there's a long-term agenda. So in terms of the long-term agenda, you will appreciate that education and healthcare are very critical components for your human capital. And government has successfully maintained a very steady investment agenda, as you can see in our educational and health outcomes. That
all right, thank you very much, Joseph, there. And at the beginning you said we have to invest, let's say in agriculture. I'm wondering if people want to add value to their produce, maybe where can they get money
because we do not have an agricultural bank. Can they borrow from these commercial banks with those kind of rates? I think, can they even compete? Can they make ends meet? Don't we need, moving forward, an agricultural bank that can give loans, credit facilities at a level that can do business? If Julius can respond to that, we'll be taking a break immediately after that. And the next segment, I'm going to give an opportunity to the audience to add value to this discussion, agree or disagree with them, but all will be after Julius has made his submission.
I think the argument for an agricultural bank has been there for quite some time, that going to a commercial bank and you borrow money to produce, to invest in agriculture is not the same as borrowing money and then you fly to China and bring finished product and sell them on the market. It has been there. I mean, even the cooperative bank, I mean, this is some of the things that have been there. And I think we have the resources. And I think for me, what I feel personally is that probably the government is so hesitant in establishing an institution like a bank because it has the money. If you look at Youth Livelihood Fund, you look at the Women Entrepreneurship Program, and then you look at, we have the credit facility in the Bank of Uganda. If you put all of these resources together, you can easily create an agricultural bank. But of course, other people begin to say that we have a very good history of poor management. We become poor who have a record around poor management of institutions. Then Uganda becomes the #1. But I think we can learn from that and put up these institutions so that at least your farmers can be able to have access to affordable credit facilities, because currently the one that we have in the Bank of Uganda is looking at commercial farmers, which I think it's okay. But we are forgetting that these small-scale enterprises, these people have 1 acre of land and they are growing the kind of crops that they have. They contribute so much to the national agricultural production in this country, and as such, I think government really needs to take a very bold step.
Okay. And all the panelists and the audience here, by the way, which is comprised of civil society members, economists, university students, business people, and also we are honored to have members of parliament. We'll be taking a break so that when we come back, I'll be able to give you the microphone so that you tell us what you think on how we can create wealth in rural Uganda. We are having a civil society dialogue on the budget framework paper 2019-2020, and this will be continuing after the break, so stay with us.
Even on those nights I sleep worry-free with Always Ultra. It has a soft, light cotton top layer and absorbs up to 3 times more. No stain, no check for 2 hours. Good night's meal, good morning energy. Good times with my family. Good morning energy, good morning energy. I stay fresh and lively with Always Ultra. Stay happy always.
My name is Iwan Pastore. I came from Pakwash. I'm the chairman of the prison, so I'm happy that I've won Super Jackpot 15 million point 6. I'm very happy. I'm too happy. That one, I'm going to make with it my business to be continue going ahead. So I'm going to buy a motorcycle and I'm going to buy a land. I begin with 3,000. I play. I got 600. So again I play 25. I got 5 million. And today I play 50. I've got 10 million. The first person I told was my boss driver. We have been traveling. We are from Lira. We are coming this way. I told him, and she was not believing that I was that man I'm having, but I told the man is already in my account. The first I won 600. That man I bought to get a phone. Again, I played. I won 5 million. That's someone I sent home. So that today, again, I won 10 million. It's still there in my account.
Even on those nights I sleep worry-free with Always Ultra. It has a soft, light cotton top layer and absorbs up to 3 times more. No stain, no check for 2 hours. Good night, sweet. Good morning, energy. Good times with my family. Good morning, energy. Good morning, energy. I stay fresh and lively with Always Ultra. Stay happy always.
In many places around the globe, people cross borders because of fear, oppression, and persecution. But in East Africa, we cross borders for the right reasons: business, careers and education, trade, and much more. No wonder we are one of the world's fastest growing regions, and the East African newspaper is championing the region's growth and integration. In East Africa, we know no borders to our potential. Connect to opportunity every week with the East African newspaper. East African, understanding the region.
Politics bamujje mu security eggwanga lyaffe ligenda kukola ki kufuna obuzibu nze omuntu wa wansi atuula wansi ku ttaka ssebo nze ngenda okuweerera omwana oyo ng'onzimbidde essomero lya kalina
naye ne gavumenti oba eri munkwe etubuzaabuza tekutula eri awo tulaga eno tulaga eno esayidi katale esayidi katale akati abantu ate koona abantu basalinga baddeno nga baddeno emmotoka zibakoone awantu atwaga gavumenti etekawo sente wetulaba ambulensi zetuzibira omuntu n'awulira akakombe ka ambulensi ng'ereeta mulwadde n'alemera mu kkubo.
Okukubiriza programu eno tuwaye n'okugitegeka libeera bbanja lyennyini tosobola kuwumula okutuusa ng'olisasudde. Entebe eno eteekwa okugasa abantu buli wiiki.
Omurasita kyanoonya gwe kyolina
lwa butayagala kumanya.
Exactly. Nobeera era bannange gavumenti etuyambe.
Nyongera kubabuulira nabagamba emyaka ng'ebiri egiyise nti lwakiri waliwo be neetaaga okusabira mukama abanonne.
Ebeera interview omuntu gy'ateekeddwa okulaba. Yattaluumu wamulabako n'amaaso.
Moses.
Wali omumanyi?
Nali mumanyi bali bayita Moses Safi.
Nti lwaki nkola activism Museveni agenda okujja naye nze nga njagala Museveni.
Nabagamba nti gavana waali.
Okunoonyereza n'okutegeera obulungi akyadde ku programu kikulu kijjayo emiramu emikulu tuwaye kwesimbi. Buli kimu tukyetegekera. Tutambula okunoonya abali mbuufu obw'emiramu egyatuwaye abalabi baffe baliko emboozi gye baagala okuwulira.
Okuva e Kaddugala paka Kampala nagira ku motoka y'amatooke emabega
eyigiriza esoomooza
naddukamu katono bwe ne gukuba omukono.
Paul kinno ssebe ekugwe
zino HV zino nnene
ewuniikiriza
yalowooza nti bagenda musalako kugulu yadduka
eteeka ku bunkenke.
Aba ali mu ssabo yeefuula alagula aliko emmandu empitirivu ennyo nga mugajajja byontumye embireesi nti ebiriwo ajja ekikapu akimugundirawo mu maaso ogenda okukebera nga mutwe gwa mwana omukazi n'agwa nafe
mwagala oli otya
naye n'akuddamu
nzimanyi nnyo ebbaluwa
kasonsomolera ng'erigoledde feddo
otyo. Tuwaye ekyusizza ate ekyayongera okukyusa ebiseera bya Uganda kubanga ddoboozi lyogerwa ate liwulirwa.
From Uganda's political and economic capital to your district.
There are very many youth today who are unemployed.
The veterinary doctors who are trained are being replaced by soldiers.
From Karamoja to Soro, from Budoda to Gulu, we are on the way to your district.
We all can do something if we are united to end sexual and gender-based violence.
The police should have one face.
When we look at the security organs that are trying to help the district, These are the organs who are really helping the rich people.
We don't just give people a platform, but we offer alternative policies with a hope that policymakers will listen.
I don't know what is happening right now in the country.
We have about 145 cases of defilement.
You hear 145 cases of defilement. Just right from which month?
There are those who are dying while they are giving birth.
1 out of every 10 girls drop out because of failure to manage menstruation.
And in many of our debates, we have also reconciled political leaders. Your opinion counts every Saturday at 8 p.m. As usual, I aspire to inspire you before I expire. I am Agnes Nandutu, the Speaker of People's Parliament.
Join Agnes Nandutu, the Speaker of People's Parliament, every Saturday at 8 p.m. only on NTV.
You're watching a CSO pre-budget dialogue organized by Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group, and we're coming to you live from the Wizards Media Auditorium here in Ntinda with our theme, Financing Rural Economic Transformation, are our priorities right in the 2019-2020 budget framework paper. We have an audience comprised of civil society members, members of parliament, we have planners, we have economists, we have chief administrative officers from different districts, and business people and ordinary Ugandans. And of course, we have a panel here that has been trying to make a case for how we can make our things right in the 2019-2020 budget. Before we went to the break, I think the Honorable Stephen from Kitale, Member of Parliament representing Bulisa, had an issue that you wanted to put across. Sir, this is your time.
Yeah, just two quick ones. One is that we need a paradigm shift. We killed the bit vets, and you remember the days of UCC, which had satellites, and then TCs, and we rushed for universities. I think that was a policy mistake. Even in other countries like Germany, you will find that one engineer has to supervise at least 25 technicians. So you need a carpenter, you need a plumber, you need a mason for you to be a relevant engineer. So we rushed for degrees, and now the toll is on us. In my days of university, in economics, we did a paper called Labor and Industry. Labor and Industry was very important, because why should you educate people you don't need in a country? So in planning, you know what you require. So if you're going to have road transformation and industrialization, the country knew when we brought to UPE 20 years ago what we required. So the UPE and USE curriculum should have then given foundation subjects. You know, metalwork, you know, woodwork, you know. Those foundation subjects prepare you to go for skilling, to go for vocational. Now, the problem is, somebody has dropped out of S4, has dropped out of S6 without the basic foundation for skilling. And now we are building up white elephants in the, and this is what he was trying to say. Those colleges, I participated as chairman of national economy in putting up those 14 colleges, plus so many others. But the numbers are not there, because people still think in this country, if you go for a vocational school, you are a failure. People still think that being a university graduate in something you'll not get a job anyway is more important. So the education curriculum, the education system has disoriented the citizens. And that's very unfortunate. And therefore we need to retool. That's why you are now hearing every graduate needs, we have borrowed a loan to reskill graduates who had wrong qualifications. But in labor industry, there's also what we call occupational migration. A right graduate should be able to do something else, but it means there is a problem. So people after graduating, after getting loans, after getting a quota for Bulisa district, which is lacking a vet, which is lacking a fisheries, but you are given a university loan, and a quota, not for the areas required. So there has been a problem in manpower planning, which we need to address.
Okay.
And now, the other one is on cooperatives and the agriculture bank. The money we have spent in NADS and Tandikwa, UIP, WEP is enough money to have a cooperative agriculture bank, period. So it's a question of us, because we are discussing a budget. Government is not going to mint more money just through loans, because already our debt stock, 30% of our budget, of our tax, of our money, local revenue, is going in servicing loans. And we're even having a challenge right now in as far as refinancing. He knows. We are refinancing up to 6 trillion. We borrowed from Ugandans. We have failed to pay the loans. And also, the Ugandans who supplied, the taxpayers who supplied the government, we cannot pay them. 30% is servicing debt. And the government is borrowing from a bucket where a farmer is supposed to borrow from a commercial bank. So the last point I wanted to make is that the high interest in Uganda is not because of commercial bank. It's because the government is competing with its private sector by borrowing from the very bucket private sector supposed to buy. And that's called crowd out effect.
Okay, crowding out the other Ugandans. All right, I'm going to come to you, the audience. And by the way, you can also send us your comment. I'm going to give you our Twitter handle is at CSBagUganda. That is in uppercase, CSBagUganda, and hashtag Uganda Budget 19. Hashtag Uganda Budget 19. Be part of this discussion by telling us what you think. If you send your questions, they will come in a way that reach you, but also you can online keep engaging so that many people are having a discussion on this very issue. I'm going to you, the audience, which is right here. You can put up your hand, you tell us where you're from, and then you please keep it brief and very concise. But for those who might know, like a gentleman from Save Uganda, Let Us Save Uganda, let me give an opportunity first from Let Us Save Uganda, because saving Uganda is needed now.
Thank you, moderator. I'm Masco Rogers. I work with Let Us Save Uganda. Civil started working in Rwanda in a partnership with CSBAG. We are in a budget advocacy.
Okay.
That's why we're here now.
From Rwanda district?
Rwanda district.
Okay.
I'm not far from Mr. Julius. He was emphasizing on science education. And to me, I can see it is very important, because once we are enforcing science education, sustainability in the society based on creating and innovations for realized entrepreneurship and socialization, we will produce more in terms of production, because as in Rwanda we are basing on agriculture, and we need to be innovative to produce more.
So you, Mr. Masco, you're saying emphasis should be put in science subjects, but also in skilling the people so that they can have skills to add value to themselves, but also contribute something.
Yes,
to the
as Mr. Just said, that we need to invest in agriculture institutions. We cannot do this without emphasizing on enforcing this sensitization of our communities, so that our parents can be convinced to take their children
to vocational institutes.
To vocational institutes.
Thank you very much, Mr.
I want to.
I would suggest you.
And we cannot.
Yes, this is what is going to happen, Masiko. Yes. I'm going to give you 1 minute each, so that if I have more time, I'll come back to you.
I have 1 point.
No. I have. I'm going to give you that microphone later. So hand it over to somebody who is behind you. There's a gentleman in a white shirt there in the middle. Please, can you be concise and precise? Your name, where you're from, and what point you have.
Thank you. I'm called Agmeni Tednus.
Okay.
From Shema district. I work as a PBC of CSBAG there in Bugonji sub-county. Me, I'm in support of someone who was suggesting that we should have back the cooperatives, and those cooperatives can help us in rebuilding agriculture, which has already been destroyed. So once people are organized again, we can see change.
What are you producing in Bugonji?
We are producing mainly coffee, matoke, and milk.
Okay. Thank you very much. I understand this government wants to produce 20 million bags of coffee next year, but now we are producing 5 million bags. Okay. So we have to cover 15 million bags because that has been a projection and a plan for this country. So I think before they do that, they have seen the market that is there, and so we need to produce the coffee because that's what the government told us to do. Please bear with me if I just give you 30 seconds or 1 minute because I want many people to participate. So let us have a lady in black. Your name, where you're from, and how you think we can transform the rural economy.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Diana Tivesigo. I work with World Vision, and I will want to add a voice on the submission about the sound education system. When we talk about rural economic transformation, I think we're going to talk about like the people it affects, either positively or negatively. We're talking about the women, the children, and the men within those communities. When we talk about a sound education system and how government is facilitating like some of these programs that are supposed to improve the sound education system that we're talking about, I think government is not putting a lot of effort. You mentioned that you went in one of the districts and enrollment was low. If you notice, districts in the eastern, like Namutumba, you talked about, Kamuli, enrollment is low, but also completion is low because there is a lot of school dropouts. They are marrying off their children when they are still young because poverty exists in those families, meaning that the programs that government is putting in place to facilitate like eradicating poverty in our country, they're not actually working. So I think government needs to revisit the strategies that it has put in place to eliminate or eradicate poverty in these communities, and some of which they've been discussed by the panelists.
Thank you, Diana. Okay, there's a lady in green. I think that should be Lydia Kovsinje. Okay, Lydia.
Thank you. Good morning. My name is Lydia Kovsinge from the National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda. I'd like to build on what my colleague Diana shared about inclusion and equity. Equity in terms of location, youth, persons with disabilities, women, among others. It would be, government needs to look at adequate funds, for example, for monitoring service delivery, especially for funds such as in the education sector and in the health sector. Where is that money actually going at local government level? And adequate financing for social protection programs, such as the Youth Livelihood Program. We are shocked to learn that for financial 2019-2020 in the budget framework paper, they had cut the YLP program by more than 50%. And we had questions as to where that money had gone. The UWEP, the disability grant, which remains stagnant, yet persons with disabilities, for example, are increasing due to accidents and also being. And the special needs education program, which continues to remain a 10th of the education sector budget, yet learners with disabilities continue to increase, and the Equal Opportunities Assessment report for financial 2019-2020 budget framework paper showed that less than half of the learners just at primary level with special needs are actually in school. So many of these persons are being left out, especially at rural level.
Okay.
And that is affecting our actual transformation as a country.
Thank you, Lydia. Okay, we actually have an actual planner, acting planner for Pader district, Catherine. I would want you to give Catherine a microphone because as you plan for the people of Pader, you also want them to be transformed economically. So in your corner there in northern Uganda, how is it?
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm called Catherine from Pader district. Joining the discussion in regards to transformation of the economy, I feel that the issue of skilling is very crucial in this regard, and also agricultural production, because that is the backbone of the country, and very many people are engaged in agriculture as their livelihood. Though, I also feel that we shouldn't look at only one sector. This should be integrated with others, because we have challenges that when the challenges are not addressed, like issues of having few teachers that doesn't meet the ceiling. That also affects issues of skilling. So we need to look at other issues also, like wages for the teachers, so that we have the adequate numbers. We also need to think about issues of the health services, because it's what makes the people healthy and productive. And also issues of poverty. I really believe that is going to transform our economy, especially in the north, where people are transforming to commercialization from a background of the 2 decades of war.
You're lucky, I think, in northern Uganda we can see some form of commercial farming in areas of Nwoya and some parts of, but especially Nwoya and Amuru. I was impressed with what I saw there. So maybe the rest of Uganda should learn from, because it's actually happening in Nwoya. Though I don't know who are the owners of these farms, but I've seen big farms in Nwoya. Thank you very much, Catherine. May we have a Chief Administrative Officer for Rubanda District, Mr. Murabura Agre. Yes, he's here. Please give a microphone to the cow, because the cow is such an important person in the district and ensuring that the district is productive. So what would you prescribe?
Thank you, moderator.
It's on. It's okay.
My name is Murabura Agre, and I'm glad to be here.
Thank you.
The discussion, I think the problem of the discussion centers on the theme. When you look at this placard down here, budgeting for equity, I think that's where the problem starts.
In what sense, sir?
When you budget for equity, you're trying to be fair in your allocation of resources as much as possible. And in the situation of Uganda, a country like ours, where you have so many competing interests, then equity really will not give you the best possible value. You are looking at issues like regionalization that Honorable Mukitali is talking about. How do you achieve that through equity, equitable allocation of resources? It means that priority sectors are going to be given a platform allocation that is based on the general average that is available in the country. And most likely you are going to leave the most priority areas that you would be focusing on to create transformation in the field of agriculture. So I think, yes, the priorities, some are questioned, but to me, they are not so bad. It's just that we are operating a limited cash budget that has to supply various competing interests, some of which will...
Let me ask this, and I'm going to use an example of where I come from, especially the administrative centers that have created. I understand Rubanda is also a very new district, not a very old district, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I come from what used to be Kabarole district. And something back, Kabarole produced Kamwenge, it produced Chenjojo, and I thought, well, that's all. But before you knew it, Chenjojo also produced Chegegwa. And before I thought Kabarole was in menopause, recently it's produced something called Bunyangabu. So, and perhaps Bunyangabu will also produce another district. These administrative centers that are being created every day, they seem to be consumptive areas of consumption other than production. Isn't that a headache for us?
Well, it depends on the way you look at the argument, really. When you look at some of these areas like Rwanda, and you look at their service delivery gaps, the service delivery needs when they were still under their mother districts, I think they are being better served under the new greater decentralization arrangement. So there are positive signs, there are positive indicators that are associated with creation of new administrative units, but also we have to be mindful of the burden they pose on the national budget overall. I think for the allocation of resources in the BFP 2019-2020, we need to focus mainly on creating efficiency and effectiveness in the way we deliver the services that we are meant to, using the little available resources. We should focus on how much we generate out of the little we are allocated to, rather than the failures that are synonymous with some of these administrative decisions that we are engaging with every day in and out.
Thank you very much, Agri. Okay, I can understand that you have so many views you want to put across, but let me give the microphone back to the panelists so that they can also respond to the views that have come from the audience. And then we shall also go back to our members of parliament because they have a key role of budget allocation and monitoring. Honorable Mkitale, what do you make of some of these comments?
We have missed senior Professor Spruma. I expected him to talk to us about one of his best subjects, focus and concentration of the budget, given that the resource envelope is limited. And in that, I thought we would talk about the fiscal discipline. The fiscal discipline is a challenge for us as the parliament responsible for appropriation, but again, in the status quo of the ruling majority in parliament, whatever comes from the executive has to pass. The timing is so unfortunate. We are going back to the campaign. And so issues of fiscal discipline become a problem. So the priorities may turn into political expedience as opposed to what would transform rural communities. Kabale, Bushenya and Kasese have been known for resisting creation of new districts. But I think Otafire finally gave it, and you have seen the multiplication, including the 40 ones. I think the debate of devolution and service delivery does not necessarily require a lot of political positions in those areas. I believe town councils and municipalities with experts, more so working with you see, we are looking at a budget as a stimulus. We are looking at government as an enabler. In a private sector economy. How come we are doing
the Honorable Mkitale comes from a district that has only one constituency. Think about it. Bulisa. Not even Bulisa West or Bulisa North. Bulisa. It's a district, it's a constituency, he's the MP, there's a woman MP, I don't know what MP, but Bulisa. So yours is a case of really
and they want
fragmentation of this.
They want to give us a kingdom which I'm opposed. Because I'm advancing the regional government. Because the districts have come too many. You see,
what kingdom in Bulisa?
You see, the regional governments I'm advocating for are coming from a constitutional amendment 2005. People hyped the term limits and forgot the other content of the amendment. Article 178 of the Constitution provides for regional governments. And actually, if we implemented them in 2007, the Constitution directed that 1st July 2007, we should have regional government. And we only had 80 districts. So you can imagine if we had implemented regional governments at that time. I don't think they would do that problem. It requires Prime Minister every year to give money. We should be having a solution within the Bugisu regional government. And I'm sure if the money was in the Bugisu regional government, there would be something. Let me tell you, every region in this country has something to offer. We now have a problem of expecting everything from envelopes from State House. The president comes, everybody is waiting for money. How were we brought up?
Including members of parliament.
Everybody. we went to schools at the time of
but not Nambeshe.
PTA. our parents during the cooperatives paid school fees for us. There was cost sharing. There was gratuity tax. These districts, when they are being formed, they're supposed to be economically what? Viable. But they are getting everything from the center.
Okay.
So the Constitution talks, you see this people power we are talking about. The Constitution talks about duties and responsibilities. I think we need to stop this too much expectation, putting too much pressure on government, and then government becomes the nation. I think every region can have some.
Let me ask the Honorable Nambeshe or maybe Kayinza, how much do you give to the President of Uganda as Parliament allocation for his gift? There's a gift package or something like that?
80 billion.
80 billion. And how much are you giving to these other programs that maybe have masses of people? Because you maybe as members of Parliament have it wrong. If you're going to give 80 billion and maybe 6 billion for reskilling the Ugandan youth, then you have, I suppose, your priorities wrong as members of Parliament.
Well, it may not be the right time for pointing fingers, but where you have a parliament with the majority of members from the ruling party.
Isn't that where you belong?
Indeed, but I belong to the progressive ones called rebels. Rebels. But even when a law is very bad, and you know, even that donation is a huge sum, and it is even classified some of the monies under classified expenditure. And if they know that there is something dubious, still members will be summoned to the caucus and then directed on what to do. And that's why a few of us who are the so-called rebels have looked the king in the face and said, no, here we are going astray and the correction is welcome. But the idea is, as a parliament, you have appropriated this money, so it's okay for the money to be used in the manner it is, because it's a constitutional accepted known allocation that you have given to the head of state. So
the information I want to give, the constitution gives equal opportunities. Regional balance is constitutional and equal opportunities. So the president, as a fountain of honor, is also mandated to be constitutional and make sure that these resources are given equitably, but also in regional balance.
But it has been difficult for Parliament to arm twist the president on the way those monies, the way they are expended. You have realized on occasions that we have come up with motions to challenge the way the donations are made, including handshakes. But at the end of the day,
I've been reading, sir, I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt you that much. In the New Vision, for example, they have been running stories of those young people, especially in the carpentry industry, how they have benefited when they have been given machinery or money and things like that. I don't know if you guys have read, but I think I have been following them in the last 3 weeks. They seem to suggest that the money given to these young people has added value to their lives.
Oh, it is creaming in inverted commas. Much as it is purportedly given to the youth, the beneficiaries are actually the well-to-do. Very little. You would have even seen the ripple effect on the way of life of this, the livelihood of these so-called recipients. But this is merely stage managed in the curtains, and then the money is taken by other people.
But you're making a very wild and very explosive allegation, sir.
Which could be investigated.
Okay.
But I had some fundamental question on especially the system of education, given that is of the colonial times and the relic of the past. The fundamental question should be, how do we realign our education system to the reality? Because Kenya, as we talk, they have had to look the IMF's Primo in the face and told him off. They have successfully, effective this year, calendar year, started with low elementary.
633.
Yeah, 633, but more practical. Actually focused. They have concentrated their focus on interest and the passion of the learner, so that the learner acquires skills and values tailored to the job market. But here in Uganda, still, when we have such policies, it seems the unpalatable ones are dictated upon us by the IMF and those.
It's no brainer that in the Ugandan hotel industry, if you want to find the middle managers, very good chefs and all that, probably most of them will have come from Kenya. So which means they've taken time to train their people. That's why they are taking our jobs right here, because they have the skill. Honorable Kayinza.
Okay, you asked about the priorities. Are we making the right priorities as Parliament? In this year's budget, our other area of focus is the tourism sector. We've realized that this sector is also boosting our economy at a higher rate, but like you've actually run an example, you've already said that the employment we are having foreigners, Kenyans, okay, let me say Kenyans who are really employed in most of our hotels. We want to improve on hospitality, on transport, Honorable Mchai talked about the air transport. Some people, like we said, people want to tour. Maybe we'd be having them, move from Arua, go to Kidepo. So we want to see that even the aerodromes, the local airports here are really transformed, are built. So at a national level, we also want the area of tourism to really want to beef it up. But my appeal maybe to Ugandans and especially who are in here, the civil society, we are all stakeholders. One of the issues on the education sector, on the skills development, is attitude change, especially our parents. I come from a rural community. But at times when you get scholarships, have bursaries, people are not willing to take them up. So it's my appeal that all of us as stakeholders, we should drum up this. Let Ugandans value this so let's not leave it to government alone. We should all engage in that.
We're going to take down the microphone back to Mr. Julius Mukunda and Joseph Enyumu. And before you even answer or maybe respond to what they have said, I know for a fact about 3 years ago, the government of Uganda asked for a loan to build a tourism school in Jinja, about $10 million. And that school was never put in place for almost 8 years, and yet the money, you were paying interest to that loan. How could we borrow money to build a tourism school and we don't do it?
Well, just to get the record right, the tourism school is speedily taking shape.
Yeah, but you know when was the loan acquired, sir?
So you're talking about the competitiveness and enterprise development program loan.
If we borrow and we don't put money where it's supposed to go.
No. The setup is running behind schedule, just under 2 years. So don't exaggerate it to the level of areas. But let's go back to the thematic focus of our debate. Yeah. We talked about the issue of financing rural economic transformation. And we need to understand, what does transformation look like? Otherwise, we get lost in the discussion of budgetary allocation. So we need to be asking ourselves about what are the outcomes we are seeing in our rural areas, and are they in the right direction? And I would just want to underscore 2 points there. You recall that, for example, northern Uganda used to have a very high poverty rate. It was lagging. But between 2012-13 and 2016-17, we have it on record from the latest National Household Survey that northern Uganda has registered the fastest decline in poverty in Uganda. It remains still highest in the country, but it is falling fastest. Now that should tell us that something is working to bring about this transformation. If you look at the rate at which our key social indicators are improving, in terms of the literacy rates, life expectancy, child and maternal mortality, and these are critical for our human development. And that is really your production base, your human capital. And so we need to be focusing on what type of outcomes tell us whether a strategy is working or not. And lastly, a lot has been discussed again about the issue of vocational education and the skill set. Remember that skills, whereas you can teach, a lot of them are acquired on job. The industry has a big role to play in the skills agenda. And on that account, through initiatives such as the grant matching facility under the project you just referred to, competitiveness and enterprise development, we are seeing a very, very high success rate in the internship program that is happening. Because even if you send these students to vocational institutions, the skills that the market wants, you acquire what we call your entrepreneurial acumen, really on job, yes, as you learn to put these skills to use. So let's focus as well on the complementary role that the private sector plays in building the skill set, and how do we support those kind of players and enterprises that are delivering these issues of business development services that we are seeing on the rise now. And that would speak to the issue of rural transformation in a more strategic focus. Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Julius Mukunda.
I think I'll take it from Joseph. And maybe divert a little to say for me is that, yes, we can look at the outcomes of rural transformation, But also I think it's also important that we can also look at what can help us get those particular outcomes. What have we put in place? And one thing I've been thinking about is that these districts we are creating, what is their role in transforming these rural communities into better places? And the cow is, you know, when he was talking about saying that, you know, they have the challenges, but also they are the good things. I think as a government, let the government look at in terms of what is the local government financing mechanism, for example. Do they have enough resources to transform these economies in their areas? I've not seen our national budget going beyond 20% going to local government financing. I'm yet to see more money within local government financing going to development. Because again, if we're talking about rural transformation, I think we also need to see what are the kind of things are we investing in. If you have more than 85% of the money you are sending to local governments being money for salaries and wages, then I think we need to have a debate on that one. So is that 15% enough? The other element for me, which I think is very important also, is do these local governments have the mandate, the power to make decisions on their own? Because previously, my understanding of decentralization was that these guys were able to make their own budgets, raise their own sources, recruit their own staff, build their own roads. But it's surprising that now we are seeing more of recentralization back to the center, which means that my friend here, even the road that might be passing through his township, is not going to repair it because that is currently a national road. It is for UNRWA. Therefore, whether it has potholes or not, it will stay until UNRWA comes to repair it. And yet I think it would be his own road because it is the road that is within his own city. When I see, you know, even the cows who are previously being recruited by the districts, okay, it had its own challenges. Fine, people wanted to recruit their sons, the sons of the soil. But I think it gave them that power and mandate to say, this is the right person we want. And if they are not performing, then we fire them and then hire somebody else. So for me, Kamal, I think that's, if we are talking about rural transformation, I think we need to improve on local government financing, to give them more, you know, more powers to determine how resources are going to be allocated. But also, we need to ensure that they have powers in terms of deciding where their resources should be, not some of these conditionalities, that money comes from the center already allocated. So you, as you are like post office, you just give out what has already been allocated.
All right, Honorable Stephen Mukitale, and your response, then I can pick maybe 3 or 4 more questions or maybe submissions from the audience.
Yeah, the Director Budget has talked about the GDP growth and the reduction of poverty in the north. I'm happy he also brought in the issue of looking at we need to be very careful not to use the per capita income indicators and figures alone. We should be more interested in the well-being of the people. The UNDP in the 80s stopped using the income per capita as a tool for measuring the Human Development Index, because you could be using the telecom money, some bank money divided by the poor in Ulisa, and you come up and say there is growth, when actually challenges are bigger. The World Vision lady also raised a very big problem, which I think we should not gloss over. The 95% of Ugandan, our population is young, and most of it is school-going. You could actually have a demographic dividend of this country, of this number, turn quantity into quality by targeting them from school. But our biggest problem is not only curriculum, but the dropout rate. In Ulisa, where I come from, 75% of our people are dropping out because we over-politicized UPE and USE by saying, no parents law, RDC arrest those who are asking for lunch, and that was a mistake. Now, why we should vocationalize USC and UPE? Because by the time he drops out of primary and P7, he has picked some basic life ways. But to wait for skilling after S6, I have already said 95% has dropped out. So what plan do we have for these citizens who have been dropping out since UPE and USC started. And that's why you have Kifes. That's why Kayora sometimes has been wrongly judged. He has kept this city, you know, by his method. I therefore support the presidential initiative with natural way of skilling. But it should not be by the president. It should be by the First Lady, who is in charge of Ministry of Education. And it must go to every region. It should be done in Soroti. It should be done in Gulu. You see, this country at independence was a contract of regions. Toro, Bunyoro, Ankole, Acholi came and agreed to form a republic called Uganda. So for anything you are doing in Kampala, without cognizance of those regions, is you are breaking the agreement. That's why one of my subjects in national dialogue. So this project is okay if it is done in knowledge. But now girls are running from Arua. They are coming from Mumbale. And there is an advert running that those who want to train should come to Kampala. Are we still a republic? And then tomorrow you are complaining. When the Kabaka says, Chapa Mungalo, Buganda is chasing us. Who has stopped you from building your own cities where you come from? This country is a republic. And we must handle it as a republic. Let's build, I build my Hoima city, build your Fort Portal city, let Karamoja also build their Moroto city. Let Gulu qualified long ago, Mbale and Imbara to become a city. Now, when you build those cities there, give them industrial park, not just this number of 20 years without road, without power, and serviced industrial parks. That's when you're going to attract people to go back to the universities and colleges back at home. That's when you're going to have real estate developers. You have all built houses in Kampala. If one day somebody wakes up and says, go home, what are you going to do? Have your homes also beautiful homes. The other problem, again, our political class, we have a problem. Somebody drives a gasola of 200 million, 300 million to a village which has no tractor. You even have no what. And again, government, we are aware. If you see why the economy, the GDP performed to almost 6 point something, it's because of good weather. How can we in this age be relying on nature? So water for production should be a priority. But you'll find, I'm now demanding UNRWA to give me water for production along the water project, the road projects. Because the very excavators which are doing roads can give me dams and valley tanks for my community. My cows will start dying in January and February because of aridity. But the Chinese are there working. How much local content is on these road projects? Karuma is ending. So it's good to invest in a lot of power and roads. But as we do them, have we brought on what brings road development we are talking about? Why is Karuma ending without water for production? Didn't you read about Akasombo multipurpose dam? So why should we only have dams which give us only power, but leave people without water for production, give people without water for drinking? So for me, it's a question of integrated water resource management, integrated multi-sectoral project alignment. But let me end this segment by giving some quick areas. Now that there's competing interests in the budget resource, where can we make a saving? If we are making good roads, when we were young people in school, this government started with vehicles, they were called Santanas, and the ministers had vehicles called Laurels. Now, why have we have good roads and we are buying gasolers, 300 million vehicles? We should stop that expenditure in government, public, and finance private sector transport for all regions. That money can be taken to factories, can be taken to cottage industry. So there is resources we can remove from that wastage transport. The other area is centralized procurement. We have saved money now in national medical stores. We buy drugs named Uganda and quality drugs, and therefore we can get bulk negotiations. But they are commonly used items. Every district, every ministry, department, and agency, including authorities, are buying different stationery. We used to have on Uganda service envelopes. So you have your budget, yes, for police and Bududa, but let there be centralized procurement. Then you say, pick fair, Oscar, you are going to produce envelopes for Uganda of this standard, rota trim of this standard. So you are creating, you are going to ring fence government money. The Bubu should work with kind of an industrial policy. You ring fence the money, you give a few suppliers. Parliament and State House are using furniture which is imported from Malaysia. How will you create industry in Uganda if you're not buying Ugandan furniture from prisons, from Uganda, and we have good timber? So there's big areas where we can make savings as a country, and for me, I think, I am a very good advocate of increased tax base. But I also want us to discuss tax policy in relation with industrialization, as opposed to just say increased OTT, increase the mobile money tax, but when you are killing the sector. So there are areas where we can really intervene. We have some money. The dialogue we need is, are we putting our priorities right? Can we put money where it gives a return on investments?
I think you deserve a round of applause there. He has given us some highlights, but also some propositions that could work. And I suppose the managers, including of our affairs, including Mr. Joseph Inyumu, who is here, are listening. If there's something good that you can pick up, please do. And so I'm going to come to you, the audience. I'll pick maybe 5. I expect my producer to tell me what time we should be ending, because now I've lost communication with her. Yes, there's a gentleman right here in the blue shirt, and then...
Thank you very much. I'll be very brief. I have two. Sorry, I'm called Emmanuel from the Forum for Women in Democracy, Forward.
Okay.
That's so, of course, my concerns about women and girls. But I have two or three major concerns. One is the social development sector keeps losing money every year. The social development sector is supposed to mobilize communities for development. It's supposed to do social protection, but every year we've been losing money. As Forward, we pride ourselves in the work the EOC does in terms of ensuring compliance on gender and equity. But now again, I think the NBFP is saying EOC is losing 1 billion instead of increasing, because the EOC was supposed to get regional offices, but we see it losing money. My other point is about when you say transforming rural societies. And through industrializing, but we have a concern. Most of these industries we are creating lack regulation and supervision. I think all of us have seen recently in the news almost every other month those industries around Namamvi, the area, the ladies there are coming out on sexual harassment. I think they're earning 2,000 per day, or in some factories I think 1,000 shillings per day. Those women you're employing and paying 1,000 shillings per day want to go back and transform their societies or even support their families. So we need effective supervision of these industries that we're talking about, and the proper laws on labor.
Thank you very much. Yes, in front here we have 3 people, if you can...
Thanks very much, Kamara. Abdul Muyimbwa from Wakiso District. Working with Forum for Women in Democracy. My issue is going to be on transforming the rural community. Wakiso District, we don't. For us, we are not talking about transformation in form of rural community. For us, we are looking at becoming a city, and becoming a city means that we are creating markets for the rural communities. In Wakiso, our budget 2019 is going to be 71 billion. The 71 billion allocations have been made, where education will consume 30 billion, and the health sector to consume 9 billion. This is an allocation which may look big, but it is small. It's going to be in a form of elevating health centers and also improvement in the education sector. Transformation of the rural community people, I will look at it as an issue which is being politicized in this country. When you look at the roads hailing to borders from Kampala, linking the villages to the borders where markets are. I'm talking about Katuna border, the road to Katuna, the roads to Busia. There are no potholes. That means that there is a leverage for exporters to come and pick the seeds from the country, products non-produced, take them direct to the borders. When we want, if we want to have our communities transformed, let's look what the women we have in the community. They are the implementers of the GDP percentages we have in Uganda, in most of the districts. The role is played by our women, and these women cannot access the financing to see it that they change their lives. But in other countries like West Africa, there is a system called Walantage. Walantage, a farmer produces his maize or seeds, brings the seeds to the store, is given a portion of little sums of money that can make him afford to pass through the 3 months. The seeds are kept at in stock, and when the prices rise, he sells on at good prices. So these are some of the things we need to have in our own country. Yeah. Now, when we get into the way how the rural community comes into the supermarket, buys products, they buy in kilograms. And when we, people in Kampala, go to the rural community, we buy yams in sacks. You can't even lift that sack. You give someone 20,000 in a sack. You come here, you measure in kilograms. Why don't we buy our rural poor people in kilograms?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Packaging and submission there from Wakiso. Yes.
I'm Msimenta Godwin, a typical Muchiga from Kabare.
A typical Muchiga. Yes. Okay.
I'm profoundly honored and exceedingly humbled to be hobnobbing with the intellectuals. When we go to rural transformation, I have to be brief. I would rather the government, actually this is an appeal, a humble appeal, to improve on rural infrastructures. Those roads in the villages. It is on this occasion, therefore, that I submit this to the government, because the parliamentarians are here. The Bunyonyi Road. Bunyonyi is a place where tourism is booming. But now there is a problem, that road is in a sorry state. Because whites come expecting much to visit the swamps, to see birds, Lake Bunyonyi, but when they just reach there, it becomes darkness at noon. So I would actually request that the government improves on rural infrastructures, and more specifically Bunyonyi Road. Secondly,
somebody said there was a tornado in Bunyonyi.
Yeah, there was a tornado, but it was so good that some of us escaped. But really, things were very dogged. Actually, things were bad. Yeah? Because even whites screamed beyond the measure. Because they were the ones screaming, what a shock, what a shock. So there was a tornado, and people were very scared. Then I would love the government to fight against corruption, because corruption is the one which is eating the economic fiber of this country. So much as money goes to the rural villages, there are some leaders who just connive with the others, and they just embezzle the money. So
I've seen the gentleman there called in Kitanga Parish, Father Batanyenda.
Yes, Father Batanyenda is very, very
good job.
He's not only clever but also intelligent. He's fighting against corruption. Okay. Then finally, I want inclusiveness. I'm working with Batwa Development Organization, these PGMs. We are helping them so that they can graduate from an impoverished life to a meaningful life. I want them to be helped so that they cannot go and steal people's property, because it's like you just have a garden here. Because that mutua will come and take all the crops away, all the beans. But if they are also assisted somewhere, I think there can be development.
Okay. Thank you very much. I want to go to Peter from Moroto, because, if you somehow you can put up your hand, Peter. I suppose my camera people will be able to get you. You seem to be quite at the back.
Thank you very much.
Make it very, very brief. Peter is from Moroto District.
Thank you very much. I am Apule Peter from Moroto. I work with a community-based organization called Moroto Community Initiative for Development, and we are partners with CSBAG. I truly agree with the submissions many of the participants have given out. Mine is, if we really need to transform communities, meaning we have to transform the source of their livelihoods. For Karamoja, our livelihoods, we rely on livestock, and given the climate that confronts our communities, we keep moving from places to places, adopting the weather. I propose that if we have to transform Karamoja communities, there is need to increase water for production. And there have been challenges where we put dams, and these dams are not well sited. A dam is proposed, and the engineers come from Kampala. You find that even when the community says that the water will not reach that dam, they put it there and they go away. So there is need to have proper engineers, or send the right people. Or at least follow the indigenous knowledge of the Karamoja. Indigenous. No, they send from Kampala. We have few engineers who maybe work at the district, but the issue of decentralizing most of these procurements is a challenge, because you find that the Ministry of Water give contracts at the center, and only they send the engineers to the district. Even sometimes you find that the sub-county chiefs don't know about the contracts. So there is need to look at the idea of decentralization and making it a reality if we have to transform communities in terms of strengthening their livelihoods.
Thank you very much. I think that was good, because we just had a submission from Kabale, and we went to Karamoja. Before that, we had Wakiso, we had Gago, and we had Rubanda. Sorry, we had Padera and Rubanda. Catherine would want to give us another submission, but let me take one from this gentleman and then here. Please, Peter, could you push that microphone to the front? Yes, sir. Your name, and please make it very brief.
Okay, please. I'm called Mr. Silva Katabarwa, District Planner Shema.
Okay, District Planner.
Yes.
Okay.
And I want to start from the point of view, alluding to what has already been mentioned, especially as regards creation of districts. But I want also, against that background, I want to observe that all the districts we have in Uganda are only getting 13% of the national budget. And then if you're talking about transforming the country with only 13% of the national budget, then it means there is something that may not actually go well. If you look at our budgets, actually the biggest proportion of the budget is wages. Non-wage recurrent is also very small. And funds for development are increasingly very small. So, and of course, some of the districts are not well endowed also to have like donor funding. Like in my district, the donor funding is just only 1% of the budget, and we have 22 billion. But what I would ask is that since the livelihoods of our people is mainly hinged on agriculture, I think the transformation should be on how to improve that agriculture from the current subsistence it is on to commercial farming. But even then, whatever we produce to benefit much better, we need something to do with the value addition. And value addition would mean that actually private sector should be, a conducive environment should be created to enable the private sector engage in processing the products that are produced within the districts. That it is only then that perhaps there can be development. So the private sector may also be weak. It means that the government must also look at how to build on building their capacity so that they can do a better job.
All right.
Now, still related to when you look at the strategic direction of the country, with the first, as is spelled out in the NDP2, increasing the stock and quality infrastructure. The first one is increasing sustainable production, productivity, and value addition in prime and primary growth sectors. The whole of production, natural resources would be there. But in our case, in local governments, actually, I think all over, the Department of Natural Resources that would support, is supposed to be controlling environmental degradation, maintaining those natural resources, they don't have a budget. Like in our case, the natural resources only gets a small component of 1.9 towards 2.4, which a component that was coming from the water grant. That's the money that goes to the Natural Resources Department or the Environment Officer. On a quarterly basis, gets 640,000. Now with 640, how do you expect this person to traverse the district to go and fight all those who are encroaching on the wetlands?
All right.
We have created urban councils, and all these urban councils, when you look in Shema, we have like 5 town councils plus 4 divisions of the municipality, Bushain the same, Tungam the same, all over. It is high time that government started thinking seriously on physical planning. Physical planning, so that now haphazard kind of constructions and the developments of urban centers is done away with. But there is no budgetary provision for lands and lands management, physical planning, cartography, surveying. Or that is the Department of Natural Resources. There is totally no budget there, and I would be glad if those issues.
So we are likely to have slums emerging instead of real cities.
Yes, that's what I'm saying. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Our cow there, Chief Administrative Officer for Shema, right?
District planner.
The district planner. Okay, for Shema. Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Yeah. Thank you very much. My name is Aliganyira Mariusi. I'm from Rwanda District, Luhija Sub-County, and I'm a PBC member. My concern today is all about health. So in Ruhija, where I come from, we have a problem. I heard that the government has got policies that health center 3s should not have ambulances. And yet my area is very far, hard to reach. When there is a mother at the health unit failing to give birth, so when she's given a referral, the distance from that place to where there is a referral at Kabale Regional Referral Hospital is a distance of like 60 kilometers. So, and it's passed via the national park. So people there are crying, and the problem again we are having, we have conserved Bugindi National Park with its animals like rare mountain gorillas. A lot of money is paid there by visitors, and I'm requesting that you take it as a special case so that we can have an ambulance there, because the situation is very...
But you are supposed to have royalties, the sub-counties which are surrounding the national park, have a certain percentage that comes back to you.
Oh, that percent is paid by those people, by Uganda Wildlife Authority. But it's always not enough to do other activities like building schools, constructing water tanks, and buying an ambulance. So,
okay, thank you very much,
thank you.
Friend there from Ruhira. I'm sure the commissioner in charge of planning is here, so he's listening. Probably something will be included in that as well. And the issue of maternal mortality is very true, because I'm told we lose about 19 women due to pregnancy-related complications on daily. And sometimes we can just hide into these statistics, but somewhere in Uganda today there's a mother who has died. There is somebody who has lost a sister, has lost a wife, has lost a mother, has lost an auntie. Real, mourning now is going on, and it continues. 19 women dying every day. That should be stopped, I suppose. Yes.
Yeah,
Catherine.
Yeah, thank you so much. As we discuss the theme for this meeting, I want to also highlight the challenges in transformation of the rural economies. And one of the issues in the north at the moment, particularly hitting Pade and the surrounding districts, is the issue of the nodding syndrome disease.
Nodding syndrome?
Yes, which in the preparation of the budget framework paper, financial year 19-20, we did not have an indicative planning figure for it. So I'm requesting that the Ministry of Health should consider that. Because previously that fund came as an emergency, and it, things that come as an emergency are also spent in an emergency way, but would love to have something which is mainstreamed in the budget.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, in addition to that, as we transform rural economies, the issues of rain-fed agriculture should also be handled through irrigation schemes. If you can have some pilot irrigation scheme so that people really get the produce that they invest in. That would also be good.
Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Catherine. We're almost coming to the end of this dialogue, so I'm going to take about 2 comments. There's a lady at the end there, and then another gentleman. That will be, then I'll have my panelists make their concluding arguments on the same. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sheila Avenitwe. My submission is, way back when I went to high school, I remember they used to teach us agriculture, singing, knitting, and of course us as young people, we thought that was torturing us. And I think I used to say I'm in one of the worst schools. Because
in some cases, they would actually send you to an agricultural farm for you to serve the punishment when you have done something not in the school.
No, as it was part, because all of us, in senior 1, you had to go for farming. I remember we used to hit ourselves because we didn't know how to do it. And we were seeing it as torture. Music was compulsory. Sewing clothes was compulsory. By the time we finished S4, okay, we used to perform well, but now I don't know what's happening. When we would leave, everyone would love to leave that school. Most of us left that school and regretted after we had left. And we wanted these schools whereby would go work for Max and come back with excellent.
So we need to go back that kind of school.
Yeah, and most of the people, I tell them, I would love all my children to go to that school. And everyone is telling me, that is a backward school. And also me, in my thinking by that time, that was it. It was a backward school. So why can't we establish that? Because right now, if you gave me a sewing machine, I was taught for 4 years, when I was even studying O-level, how to sew. Most of the people who are doing music, they started music from S1, was studying music. And I'm wondering, why can't we also utilize that?
I think the panel and the audience agrees with you that we need to go back to education that is going to give us skills, the skills that can help us in solve the day-to-day problems, challenges that we have. We have to look at our challenges and see how we can address those challenges by giving the education that can address those same challenges. Yes, sir. And who has the microphone? There's a gentleman here, and we're going to close at that. Yes.
Thank you very much. My name is Cyrus Mwelwa from African Leadership Institute here in Kampala. I have a very simple question by way of revisiting the vocational training. I want to ask, where is the place of ICT in all this? Because we know very well that ICT is the game changer. Actually saying that ICT is the next big thing is an understatement. It is actually the big thing.
Me, I think it is the equalizer. That if I have ICT here, and for the kid in New York and the kid in Uganda, you are the same level if you have given the same.
Precisely, ICT. And that's why I'm asking, where is the position? Where is the situation? Where are we with ICT? Because no one has ever alluded to that. No one has ever mentioned it.
All right.
To give an example of Kenya, because everybody has been giving examples of Kenya, we have incubators for young people who have ideas. Those ideas are nurtured. And ideas are not really just about making things vocationally. These are ideas coming from people. So this is also a way of growing young people. So ICT is the key thing.
All right, thank you very much. ICT goes with OTT. All right, thank you very much, the audience. Let me come back to Honorable Mukitale, then Julius Mukunda. Well, in a way, Commissioner Joseph is more or less government, so more or less executive, so he will be able to say the final, give us the final talk. Honorable Mukitale, sir.
Yes, I am an advocate of advancing water for production irrigation as one of the infrastructure. But having said, we are having this problem because of climate change. So I think on the budget we need also to make sure that the issue of tree planting, regreening, and environmental management is brought on board, because that was not brought. The last question scooped what I was going to raise. in all what we are doing in this studio, we are in ICT revolution, we are in the information age. we must emphasize and put the issue of ICT as not only ICT science and technology. Innovations are the way to go. That's another area where we need to increase our budget. The planner, it's good having a planner, because part of our problem is we lost planning. This country after wars decided to go into PEP, Poverty Eradication and Alleviation Program. It was basically about recovery, rehabilitation and stabilization. Now, we are about to end NDP2, meaning that we are in going, a budget is a one-year plan. So I think that's why the role of planners must now take their space. All these challenges we are talking of, wrong curriculum, jobless graduates, are a product of poor planning. I will give you just one worst case. In 2009, as chairman of National Economy, I did present on the floor of Parliament, where fast-tracking both the Kampala City Law, and I'm happy Mukono Wakiso is saying they need to be in the conurbation, Greater Kampala conurbation, which requires also a law. I raised the concern why we could have a country planning act without gazetting the development areas, and that's why I'm in full support of the National Fiscal Plan, which has not gone to cabinet yet. Okay. Because in that one, it provides for integrated corridors. If you're doing a corridor for a road, a city has a structural plan. So you do a corridor not only for a road, including standard gauge, if you want a metro tomorrow, if you want power line. So the country has lost a lot of money in land acquisition. In Ibulisa now, there are 3 old houses are being removed for oil and gas, but we knew this in 2006. After Chogam, we made an entire road. And you will find that the structures being compensated for are structures of 6 years, 6 stories, 5 stories. So planning is very cardinal. If you don't plan, you're going to spend money in different land acquisitions. You even propose unnecessary constitutional amendment, when actually if you had done a good planning and a good land acquisition, you would have solved the problem.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
That is very important.
Thank you very much, Honorable Stephen Mikitale. Very briefly, Julius, your parting shot.
My parting shot, I think, I will take it from what Joseph talked about. When you say rural transformation, what exactly kind of outcomes are we looking at? But just to add also from that is that what kind of things do you need to have that kind of output or outcome we want in terms of rural transformation? And I think we have one thing in this country, which is the Bubu policy. I think if we would really put our efforts and concentration and invest in the implementation of our Bubu policy,
local content,
this would definitely put us at another level. Why are we still not doing it? Why is it that we are not supporting our local entrepreneurship, our local products, to be at a particular level? For me, Kamara, those are investments that the government can go into, and I just say, please go ahead, even if you make a loss, because I know 5 years down the road, we can get something. Let's have political commitment into these initiatives. Our minister has had, of finance has had a very good story. He was given a contract to supply goats, but little did he know that the goats must be of the same color, must be of the same age, must be of the same size.
Quantity and quality.
So the issue of quality and quantity are very key and very important. And I think for me it's
and you must be able to sustain the
And you must
supply.
sustain the supply. So it's very important that the different government invest in this area.
All right, thank you very much, Commissioner Enyimo. Your parting shot, very briefly.
Well, thank you. One is to say that local ownership and leadership is very critical for the success of our budgets and the national plan. So we received this dialogue in good faith, and we've had a listening ear as we finalize the budget. Elements of this dialogue that are deemed appropriate will move on. Number two, to remind ourselves that the budget for 1920 has a theme: industrialization for job creation and shared prosperity. And to deliver that theme, we have to be mindful that we have to prioritize and sequence our interventions. So a lot of things that have been said are legitimate, but they must be subjected to a prioritization framework. And with that, I close with the final remark that we've discussed about rural economic transformation. And at the heart of that is the issue of rural infrastructure. And so the budget for 1920 puts a lot of emphasis on issues of water for production, over 95 billion shillings, rural electrification, close to 600 billion shillings. We have feeder roads and their maintenance, attracting close to another 500 billion. We have tourism roads. Somebody talked about tourism. Those are really key. And then, of course, expanding the internet access, the fiber optic. So let us make sure that, given that these allocations have gone in, you have a role to play as civil society to ensure that there is a good return on this public investment.
Thank you very much. A round of applause to my panel. And a round of applause to yourselves. Let me also maybe thank the following people who have contributed. All of you have contributed. Thank you very much, Muramira Agri, Rwanda Cow, Catherine, Acting Planner, Pader, Honorable Kainza Justin, Member of Parliament, Honorable Nambeshe from Manjia, thank you very much. Masika Rogers from Let's Save Uganda, I thank you. Apule Peter from Moroto, Lydia Komsinje from Nodipu, and Diana Tebesugwa, and all of you who have come from different parts of Uganda. We've had people from Karamoja, from Kabale, from Wakiso, from Pader, and I think we have a real representation of Uganda here in this room at the Wizards Media Auditorium in Ntinda. Thank you very much for being a part of this budget dialogue, and brought to you by Civil Society Budget Advocacy Group. I should also be able to thank Ford Foundation, Oxfam, DGF, and Trust Africa. And this brings us to the end of this afternoon's dialogue. Perhaps maybe next time we should be talking about the increasing national debt or debt burden for Uganda. I think we never touched that. And all of you have been a part of this from across Uganda and beyond. Thank you very much. Good afternoon and God bless Uganda.
We have watched this show begin. We have traveled the entire country in search for commercial farmers.
Cassava is now a cash crop in Teso.
Farmers from across Uganda have benefited from agriculture.
Somebody who is doing fish farming, this is an opportunity, a huge opportunity, in that the market and the demand is already available.